As I sit back sometimes when I'm teaching school and look at these kids that I deal with, I went to Wynnewood, spent the day yesterday with a bunch of 5th and 6th graders. And when I get upset with my academic kids because they can't remember something, I have to remind myself they are 10 years old. Sometimes, they've never heard of Ronald Reagan except on paper. They don't even remember Bill Clinton. And, they don't remember a lot of things. They don't know the things that we've been through because they're not old like we are. May 11th of this year will be 42 years since I graduated high school. And some of you in the audience, that's just a drop in the bucket. I understand. And some of y'all are thinking, 42 years? This guy's old. And when we have our reunions, which I didn't go to the last one, but when we have reunions, I show up and think, man, what happened to you guys? You guys got old. Because they're walking stooped over. They're limping. They're gray. They're wrinkled. They're griping and moaning about all the things that are wrong with them. And I think back, this isn't how we spent high school. Because we didn't have those problems, most of us, in high school. So when I start thinking this morning about things I want to remind, and I want us to remind our young people to be thankful for and utilize while they have it and take care of it, I want to begin. I know you can't stop from getting old. But I want to remind, and I want to read a passage to remind our young people to appreciate what they have before it's gone. And I'm not just talking about hair. I'm talking about health. I'm talking about energy. I don't know if you're one of those people. Y'all know Josie is the love of our life right now. 2 years old, and it's like watching Henry run around, watching these little kids. I get exhausted watching them. When Josie leaves our house, I have to lay down on the floor and take a nap for a while. Because they just keep going and keep going. And I can't imagine ever having been that way. I don't know if y'all feel that way sometimes. Turn with me to the Old Testament, the book of Ecclesiastes, the last chapter of Ecclesiastes. If you remember much about the story behind Ecclesiastes, it's a book, a letter, Solomon wrote specifically to his own children and to the children of Israel. But a lot of people through the years, writers or commentators I've read in various ways will say it was like an old man's letter to a young person. Son, let me tell you about, you know those kind of stories. And chapter 12 is honestly an old man trying to get young people, his children and the other young people, to appreciate God in the early years so that they can be dedicated when life gets hard. One of the things I try not to do very often when I deal with teenagers, and some of y'all have dealt with them as much, if not more, than I have, when they're complaining and moaning about the terrible tragedies going on in their life, I hate to say, just wait until you have real problems. Just wait till life gets hard, because they think it's hard now. And I understand that. I used to be there. That's what Solomon's doing. He's telling his children to get dedicated to the Lord now, because as things go on in life, it gets harder in many ways. And he mentions in chapter 12, one of them is the physical existence of man gets harder. There are very few things most of us older folks did not appreciate until it was gone, like health. If you don't have health, you understand what it was like to have it. But as long as you're in good health, you don't think about it. Solomon says, beginning in verse 1 of chapter 12, "Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them." That does not mean that older people cannot enjoy life. They do. But he means, generally speaking, there's not a lot of physical joy in the life of an older person sometimes, because it's just hard. It's difficult. I tell people sometimes, I hurt myself in my sleep now. I don't have to do anything to get hurt. Kendall and I know some of you other people, we dealt with plantar fasciitis in the past. I've had plantar fasciitis in my heel so bad in the morning, I had to crawl to the bathroom because I couldn't walk. That was a wake-up call to me that you ain't 20 anymore. That's what Solomon's talking about. Young people, there's lots of things, and I'm not trying to be the old man getting on to young people because they don't appreciate stuff. He's telling them, please use your good days to the Lord's benefit while you can, before the days come when you have no pleasure in them. And then he begins to talk about the actual physical qualities of human. When the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. And then he says, remember in the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble. Very few young people have trembling hands. But the older we get, generally speaking, that's when you see those things begin to creep in. Sometimes it starts at 20, sometimes it starts at 90. But generally, when you see people who can no longer do those things that they used to do, they're not kids anymore. It's hard to do those things. They can't thread a needle anymore. They can't tie their shoes anymore. That's something you don't think about when you're 18 years old and you can do anything you want. He says, the keepers of the house will tremble. The strong men shall bow themselves. I understand the legs and the back are the strongest parts of the body. I don't know which one exactly he refers to there. You're supposed to lift with your legs and not with your back, I understand. But if you ever notice, as we get older, sometimes we get shorter. It's not just gravity. We begin to walk like this. I got out of my truck not long ago and somebody said, what's the matter, Roy? I said, what do you mean? They said, you're walking sideways. And I said, well, that's just kind of how I walk now, because my back hurts on one side, my knee hurts on the other, and they don't argue, they don't agree all the time. There's that song that George Jones sang about needing the rocking chair. I love that line where he says, it might take a little longer, but I'll get there. That's what Solomon's talking about. He said, the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders shall cease because they are few. About 2 months ago, I went to the dentist, and I had a cracked tooth for 5 years. Finally, I got tired of this. I got tired of dealing with the pain every day, so they said, well, for $6,000, we can do a root canal and put a bridge over it. And I said, how much to pull it? About $150. I said, just jerk it out. I said, because at 60, I'm not paying $6,000 for one tooth. So now I got one of those teeth I used all the time that isn't there anymore. It's going to happen. You know people in your family that don't have their own teeth anymore. I'm not mocking them. And some people at 100 will have all their teeth. But think about, young people, the day when you can no longer chew a steak. You can no longer eat corn on the cob. There's also lots of other things that the church might need from you that you might not be able to do. Do them now while you can. And he said, those that look out of the windows be darkened. Let me tell you, these windows got dark when I was in first grade, and they ain't gotten any lighter. Every time I go back, the doctor says, well, let's just guess ahead of time we're going to need to up your prescription. And I said, well, when do we reach the point where there's nothing we can do? Legally, I think I'm blind. I'm thankful for glasses. But you know, my teachers used to do this in school. They'd look over their glasses at you when they were mad at you. When I do that, everything's a blur. I can't see one person from another. And they're not getting better. Young people, when your eyes start going, they're not going to suddenly decide at 50 to start getting better. Enjoy things while they work. That's what Solomon's saying. And we don't, generally speaking, until it's gone. There was one of our teachers the other day, she and I joked, Miss Pinnick next door to me, we joke all the time. She's got her health issues, I've got mine. We don't really share very many health issues, but sometimes I can tell she's hurt. And I say, what's wrong? She said, you know, Mr. Deering, if I was a horse, they'd put me down. And I said, yeah, but you're not a horse, and so we just got to keep going. And I appreciate people who do that. There's a great number, as Ron mentioned in the prayer, here this morning. It's all they can do to keep going. And I say that this morning not for pity's sake for them, but for encouragement's sake for you young people and maybe some old people who don't have those issues. Go do what you need to do. You can still get up and go do it. Solomon kept on talking. The daughters of music shall be brought low. I've joked about the fact that about 5 or 6 years ago, the doctors told me my hearing in my right ear was basically gone. My left ear was going. Finally, I broke down and bought this hearing aid for my left ear. And Beverly said, okay, now you can hear in one ear. Let's work on listening now. Doctor said there's not much we can do in this ear. If we put a hearing aid in that one, we're just going to amplify the muffled. It's going to be louder. Still going to be, but it's going to be louder. The daughters of music shall be brought low. You ever ask yourself which one you'd rather lose, your hearing or your sight? Let me tell you the answer to that. Neither one. But unfortunately, at some point, you might begin to lose one of those. They, verse 5, when they shall be afraid of that which is high, and fear shall be in the way, and the almond tree shall flourish. Some of us, I tell people all the time, I used to have salt and pepper hair. Now there's not a lot of pepper left. And I'm not here to say people don't, I don't care if you have hair or not. That's not the issue. We all understand, generally speaking. I see girls at school now who are dyeing their hair silver. I say, you got to earn those. You can't just go get them in a bottle. That's just cheating. Afraid of that which is high. Now, that's not the fact that we're afraid of heights. It means, generally speaking, our balance as we get older. Not what it used to be. If you're in this audience and you're 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, do you not catch yourself putting your hand on something now more than you used to? Get out of the car and grab the door handle more than you used to? I used to never need help standing up. Now I just need to make sure I don't fall down. That's what he's talking about. And so the first thing I wanted to mention, I'm going to beat the horse to death. Young people appreciate the fact that you've got health while you've got it. And some people who are young don't. I want to mention a couple other things real quickly, and I do not at all want to embarrass anybody. But young people, there's a couple of things you have that only you can destroy. One of them is your name. I tease Beverly because most of y'all know we've lived here. I've lived here almost every minute of my life. So when you live here a long time, people generally know your name. So she works at Tinker now. She works at the front desk, and she's got a little card there. It says Beverly Deering. And she said people stand there sometimes and they'll go, Deering, Deering. And she said, I can see it coming. And they'll go, are you kin to Roy Deering? And she'll say, that depends. Do you like him or not? And I said, well, honey, don't say that because somebody might be honest with you. But y'all know that's just the way it is in a small town. You live here long enough, people are going to know. Some of you young people, you get asked that question every single day. You do. I get asked when I go to Chick-fil-A if I'm Grace's dad because they remember her. You know, that happens. Your name sometimes has something attached to it, good or bad, that you didn't earn. But let me tell you, you can destroy it. Not just for yourself, but for the rest of your family. In Proverbs chapter 22, verse 1, Solomon said, a good name is more desirous than gold or silver. Well, let me tell you, when I was younger, you would have had a hard time convincing me of that. Didn't really care about my name. Just give me some gold and silver and I'm happy. Call me what you want. Just call me rich. But you know, as I get older and as I get hopefully just a little smarter, I understand what Solomon's talking about. Because there's been times in my life I have thrown a shadow on my name, and it takes a while to get it off. Unfortunately, people have long memories when it comes to bad things and short memories when it comes to good. And so be careful of your name. Paul told Timothy, be an example of the believers. People might not always remember the good things you do. That's not fair, but that's the truth. And they will remember the mess-ups. It's also not fair, but it's the truth. The Bible says, and Paul's on writing, give them no cause to speak evil of you. That doesn't mean they won't speak evil of you. Sometimes they will anyway. But don't give them a reason. Young people, protect that name. Sometimes some of y'all have been to funerals for somebody from our congregation or maybe not from our congregation. Somebody who's lived in their community for a long time. And people that you don't even know from the community will go, you know what? She was a good lady. He was a good man. They hear the name and they think good things, honest, trustworthy, dependable. That's what Solomon's talking about. And so young people, you'll have that name your whole life. Make it a good one. Next this morning, I want to remind you young people, this is a lesson in its own, but I can't help mentioning this morning. You live in the most ungodly, immoral world that has ever existed. The stories I hear young people today telling themselves about their own sexual exploits shocks me. especially when I consider that some of them are 12 or 13 years old. It's not just shocking, it's sad, it's scary, it's disappointing, it's upsetting. And I don't just mean that as an old man. This world is sexually immoral to a degree I can't begin to understand. And it worries me for the young people in this audience and those to come. Because I don't know if it's going to get any better. And your parents cannot protect your purity. Only you can. I want to read a passage from Titus chapter 2. Where the writer, and this is where a lot of times we get those passages about old women teaching the younger women and all those things, young men being taught by the older men. And those are good things. But I want to read Titus chapter 2, beginning in verse 11. Titus chapter 2, beginning in verse 11. For the grace of God that bringeth salvation hath appeared to all men, teaching us that denying ungodliness and worldly lusts, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world, looking for that blessed hope and the glorious appearing of the great God and our Savior Jesus Christ, who gave Himself for us that He might redeem us from all iniquity and purify unto Himself a peculiar people, zealous of good works. These things speak and exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no man despise thee. He said we are to deny ungodliness and worldly lusts. You know something the young people don't think about, because I never did. When I was 18 years old, I could not picture my granddad ever having been a teenager. He was 80 years old when I was 18. He was probably born old. That's the way I viewed it. How could he ever be a teenage boy battling all the stupid temptations that teenage boys have to deal with? But he did. And so I think young people today also think their parents don't understand. The grandparents don't understand. And again, I don't want to embarrass anybody, but everybody who's older understands, because we used to be teenagers and 20 years old. You know, one of the greatest pieces of just practical advice that I got from somebody in my life, and it's just so profound, it's so simple. Young people, if you want to avoid those kinds of problems, don't be alone together when you're teenagers. You know how simple that sounds? Denying ungodly lusts. Keep yourself spotless from the world. You all in this audience, young people, you know young people who partake in activities that I'm hoping scare you to death. I'm hoping they bother you, but you hear about them because people talk about them openly. I'm not here just to talk about the dangers of unwanted pregnancies or diseases. I'm talking about scriptural purity. Keep your body pure. I want to talk finally this morning about the value of the most important thing you own, that's your soul. Young people, old people, and everybody in between, we have complete control of where we spend eternity. God made that possible with His Son. I can now determine where I spend eternity. And it's not because I did anything good. It's just, am I going to live right or not? Jesus made it possible for me to spend eternity in heaven. But I choose whether or not to go. And when I give in to sin, what I am literally saying is, I don't care about heaven that much. I'm willing to risk it for whatever this temptation is. That's why Jesus in Matthew chapter 26, verse 16 said, what gaineth a man if he owns the whole world and loses his soul? I looked up something this morning just to be up to date. I like to give you up-to-date information. So I looked up Mr. Musk's value this morning. I'm not picking on Elon. I'm not jealous of Elon. Not at all. But he's a name that most of us today are familiar with, along with several others. Those rich folks. We're rich too, by the way. Rich means you got more than you need, and generally we do. But Mr. Musk makes, on top of what he already has, will make $46 million tomorrow. He'll make $2 million an hour. And he'll make $32,000 a minute and over $500 a second. I don't say that out of jealousy. That just astounds me. My little pea brain can't comprehend that amount of money. But you know, there's people in this world who can't comprehend how much money you make. Because money rules the world, but it's not worth our souls. We live in a country, and have for generations, a country that has promoted capitalism and gaining excess and possessing. And it's not wrong to have excess. It's not wrong to possess. The Bible does not say that it's wrong to have. It's wrong to love those things. Love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. That's what John said in 1 John chapter 2. But the value of our belongings. People talk about, the other day, some of y'all seen my truck sitting out right over here. 2006, 250,000 miles. I'm not here to complain. Now it's got the customization in the front from the deer. And I hadn't fixed it yet, because it's still running. But I might have tracked down a bumper, so we're going to get that taken care of. But somebody at school the other day, one of our coaches said, you know, Mr. Deering, you need to replace that thing. Like in Of Mice and Men when they think Candy needs to shoot his old dog. Mr. Deering, you need a new truck. I said, no, why? This one still runs, still gets me to work. It's ugly, but so am I. You know, I'm not really worried about it. But I understand that. We live in a country where advertisers encourage us to be discontent with what we have. You need a new this, you need a bigger that, you need a nicer one of these. What you have is not good enough. What you have doesn't work. This is better. I've learned long ago, and I think I've shared this, the words new and improved to me means the box is smaller, it's more expensive, and doesn't work as good as it used to. But we live in a world that tells us value, possessions, belonging. And it reminds me of that story from Huckleberry Finn, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. I know it's a controversial book, but there's a line in that particular book. Some of y'all may not be familiar with Huckleberry Finn. There's a character in there, the slave Jim. He's a slave in the 1860s, 1840s actually in the story. Slaves owned nothing. They had no money, none. But Jim realized he was worth $800 because slaves had value. You could buy and sell humans. Jim was a strong man. He was worth $800, and he said, I was rich because I owns myself, and I'm worth $800. Jim didn't own anything, but he realized nobody really owns me. I'm worth $800. You know what? Jim didn't understand, but then again, Jim did understand. Possessions don't make you important. They make life comfortable. Years ago, there was a 27-story skyscraper being built in Mumbai, the country of Mumbai. The richest person in India was building it there. The price tag for his home was going to be $2 billion for his home. It was a 4-year process. It was 550 feet tall with 4 million square feet of interior space. It's a pretty nice place. How does that compare to where you live? But you know one thing that you've ever noticed in a lot of those palatial places? They're houses and they're nice houses, but they're not homes. You know the difference in a house and a home. A house is the structure. A home is the love and the companionship and the love, the family that's shared there. Some of y'all, like me, grew up in a little frame wood house where, you know, in the wintertime the water would freeze on the windows, and in the summertime you'd die a heat wave, and, you know, the rats were bigger than cats and all that. But you know what? Home is not important how much it costs. I want to read you some scriptures to remind you. Proverbs 11, verse 28. He that trusteth in his riches shall fall, but the righteous shall flourish as a branch. There's nothing wrong with possessing. Just understand that it will not last into the next life, and it will not punch your ticket to the next life. Proverbs 27, verse 24, for riches are not forever. Matthew 13, verse 22, in that parable of the sower, remember Jesus gives a parable of the sower. The sower throws seeds out, and he talks about the different kinds of soil. And he said that some fell among thorny ground. And he said where the weeds sprang up, and the deceitfulness of riches choked out the word. What does he mean, the deceitfulness of riches? I don't care how much it lies to me. Give it to me. I can deal with some deceit as long as I got some gold in my pocket. Really, that's what people think. Jesus understands something we sometimes don't until it happens. Riches won't solve problems. I know my mom used to say, those who say money won't buy happiness just don't know where to shop. She said that in jest because she never had any. Mark chapter 10, verse 24. The disciples were astonished at his words, but Jesus answered again unto them, Children, how hard is it for them that trust in riches to enter into the kingdom of God? Sometimes people translate that as another passage in Matthew where he talked about the camel through the eye of a needle. How hard is it for them that trust? It doesn't say how hard is it for them that have riches. Again, we might not have riches like somebody else has, but we are rich. So he's talking about us. If you trust in that, be careful. So, I want you to think, young people especially, you had a time, there was a time in this world, young people, you did not exist. But there will never be another time when you don't exist in some form. You're eternal. You're spending eternity somewhere. You might leave this life, and we will all cry over your casket, and I mean that sincerely. We will miss you. But you will exist somewhere forever from now on. And that's a hard thing to grasp for us, because in our world, everything has a beginning and an end. You do not have an end except in this world. But where will you spend the next one? It's totally within your control. In Psalm 21, verse 4, listen to what David said. He asked for life of thee, and thou gavest to him, even length of days, forever and ever. Now, I'm not going to live forever and ever on this earth. I wouldn't want to, because I can imagine in another 60 years what it's going to be like to try to get out of bed. I understand that. I will not live physically forever, but I will exist forever. And I need to make preparation for that. And I need to protect that now. Daniel 12, verse 2. And many of them that sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to everlasting contempt. Daniel said, even in the Old Testament, when you die, it's not over. You're going to arise someday. Daniel didn't know when, or probably exactly how, but the prophet Daniel knew it was going to happen. We're going to live in either everlasting life or everlasting contempt. That choice is ours. Young people, you control your eternal destiny. And it starts now. It doesn't start when you're 30 or 40 or when you've sown your wild oats. It starts now. Remember Paul wrote to Timothy, you be an example of believers? We don't know how old Timothy was, but he was considered a young man. What Paul meant when he said that to Timothy was, whatever your age, 16, 18, 20, whatever Timothy's age was, you're a member of the church, then age doesn't matter. Act like one. You don't get to act like a teenage member of the church and do all these things that are wrong. You're a Christian. You live by the same rules as everybody else. You're a Christian, act like it. John chapter 3, verse 14. And as Moses lifted up a serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Some translations say shall not perish. That's not right. It says should not perish. We shouldn't. We should have everlasting life. How precious is your soul. I want to read you a couple of verses and then quit this morning. Matthew 16, verse 26, I mentioned earlier. For what is a man profited if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Or what shall a man give in exchange for his soul? I want you to do yourself a favor, just out of curiosity. When you get a chance this evening or some other time after church, Google the value of all the world's possessions. The number will astound. I can't even pronounce what they call the number. How much is everything worth? Jesus said, if you owned everything, your soul's worth more. And young people, you already own it. Nothing you ever make, nothing you ever gather or possess can hold a candle to what your soul is worth. What would a man give in exchange for his soul? Finally, in Ecclesiastes chapter 6, verse 2, Solomon said, a man to whom God hath given riches, wealth, and honor, so that he wanteth nothing for his soul of all that he desireth. Yet God giveth him not power to eat thereof, but a stranger eateth it. This is vanity, and it is an evil disease. You remember that church in Laodicea, the last of the 7 churches Jesus wrote about in Revelation? It said that congregation, those people there, if you understand, Laodicea was a rich city because of the elements that they had in the ground that could make this substance from the mud. It was an ointment that the people could put on. It was a cure, a medical cure. And because of that, people came from all over the world to buy it. The people of Laodicea got rich, and so members of the church were wealthy. They got so wealthy that they didn't think they needed God anymore. There's a lot of people like that in this world. But you know what's ironic? Who gave them that wealth? That's what they don't think. That's what I don't think about sometimes. I don't want to get so blessed by God that I don't need Him anymore. What a ridiculous situation. That's what Solomon's talking about. A man to whom God hath given riches, wealth, and honor ought to get on his knees and thank God for it every day. But instead, he wants nothing for his soul. I'm living it up and living the dream, and when I die, I'll be in the ground. And then, one day, he'll find out it ain't over yet. Now I got to answer for it. Even Mark Twain, the famous American writer, one time said, be careless in how you dress if you choose, but keep a tidy soul. Now, people today have the careless dress down. It always amazes me when I go to Walmart and see people in their pajamas, and I think, well, if you go to Target, you're supposed to wear your good pajamas because it's kind of an upscale store. People have the dressing, slouchy down. But the tidy soul is something we need to work on. Young people, listen to Peter as we close. 1 Peter 1, verse 22. He's writing to Christians. Seeing that you have purified your souls in obeying the truth through the Spirit unto an unfeigned love of the brethren. You've purified your souls. See that you love one another with a pure heart fervently. We've obeyed the gospel. We've purified our souls. Let's keep it that way. Because in the end, it's the only thing that matters. This morning, the lesson is yours. I hope it will be encouraging to some point, maybe challenging. I don't know. I hope it'll be something that especially young people can use in the days to come.